Lee.
Sounds good. I think Craig is on this call. I'm looking to see if he's with us right now, but he'll probably be on here. And in honor of him, we're going to start on time. I know that Craig liked to turn this meeting into about a 4-hour time period. So if we can cut that in half, we'll probably be doing pretty well. So if you don't know me, I am a little bit sarcastic from time to time. Craig would probably have you out here in 17.5 minutes would be my guess if he were running this meeting, but he also didn't have to do it in a pandemic. So I'm going to walk you through some information. Susie sent you some attachments today that's going to give you the information that you're going to need from a section management standpoint. A little bit different in Zoom than a conference call. And I can get a little bit of eye contact as we go forward, and we'll maybe take a pause as we work through, but we are going to try to use our time well and respect your time and know that there are going to be questions at the end and even afterwards. So first of all, I want to say thank you to Craig and to Susie for their support and assistance here, but also our leadership team, Byron Olson and John Peterson, Mark Weasley, Brad Skogerbo, Rick Rude, all have been a big part of the planning that's gone into a tournament that many folks didn't think we were going to be able to have, quite honestly. And we're going to do our best to try and bring this season to a good completion. So, I see Tony's on the call as well. So Tony Wolfbauer, thanks for your help as well. Certainly appreciate that. Got an agenda. We've got event management keys. And again, many of you have seen this before, the section manager's guide, the rules and policies, which we aren't going to spend our time in, but certainly are available for folks. A little bit around emergency and what we're doing with our tournament. So first of all, I think your chain of command is really important. It's important to me that you follow through with that. So tournament manager and site manager are the first line and should be working together. If there are issues there, your section manager is the person to go to. So make sure and inform folks that they work through you on those things. And then if need be, move that on to the region secretary, and I will be available as well throughout those weeks as we go through the tournament to provide additional assistance as needed. But know that group will do a really good job. My cell phone and my email is listed there. I do get a lot of email traffic, so text message is a much better way sometimes if you need immediate things, and just make sure and put your name on it when it comes in so I can get back to you and know who it is that's leaving me a message and or what section you're working with as we go forward. I think this year more than any, when we move on to number 3 there, the section tournament management aspect, you've got to have folks on site to manage it, but confirming with our teams as to what their intents are is going to be really important in terms of how much are they going to participate in your tournaments and what's that going to look like. Got a couple different models going on. Some sections are working their way through high seed duels to get to a top 2 in team, and others are planning to do 4 teams at one site, run two matches, and then have the 2 winners go against one another to get to one winner at each of those 2 sites. Some will have some pigtail matches along the way, and certainly you can feed those in as you need to. Make sure that your site managers are in place for all of your venues, especially if you've got high seed duels taking place, that you have folks there that have the right connections, and again, contacting through you first of all, and then working their way as we go forward. So really important that we have that in place. Susie's talked with me a little bit about reporting of results. Brackets are going to look a little bit different probably because we don't have true section brackets for our different events. But in terms of team results, when you're looking at those, want to make sure that you are getting those team results updated as quickly as you can, and make sure that you have the section bracket information that you can enter that, because it will go live once you put that in. And so you have the ability to directly insert information into the website, which then becomes public. So make a note of that if you would. There will be some additional information coming on how updates are done for individual, but a lot of that will work through track as we work through those tournaments. So Susie, I know you weren't excited to speak in this particular meeting. Anything else that you'd like to share around brackets and reporting of scores?
I don't think so.
Okay. Appreciate that. I think as we continue forward in this tournament, consistency is going to be really big. I'm in letter H there in number 3, right? And so making sure that your site managers have a good understanding of it. We're moving beyond a typical season dual, try, or quad right? In having these teams, and we have expectations, and it's important that we set those expectations early. So as we progress through rounds to state prelims and on to the final state venue, that everyone knows what those rules are. Make sure that you've got good notes, that they're understanding the rules and policies, and when there are questions, we get those sorted out and figure those things out. I think there's some unusual aspects as we go through this year and what that looks like. We're very used to wrestling our individuals out to, you know, placements at our section level, and that's not going to be the case as we go forward this year. So making sure people understand what that is. John Peterson did a nice job of providing some sample brackets. I think those are in the packet, correct, Susie?
Yes, correct.
Yep. So as you look at those, if you have questions, don't be afraid to reach out. But again, certainly you have those in there. So take your time and walk things through. Many of you I've seen on lead meetings and or in other places, and you have some additional background that maybe they won't have. And everyone's assumption is it's the same as last year unless I'm told differently. So we have to be really thoughtful about making sure people understand that. Weight certification for tournaments. I'm on number 4 there. If we have student athletes who have had difficulty getting their weigh-ins and there's a need to appeal their weight certification, there is a process for that. And it's in rules and policies. So in some cases, it could be injury. And then of course, in this year, it could be quarantine related. So make sure that they understand that those are possibilities, that you may have to do that. It isn't a weigh-in at home if you're quarantined. We're not doing that. We're going to use the process to take a look at the facts and then determine what we do with that particular appeal and where their weight class is. One of the things that I'm going a little bit off script, but talking about weigh-ins, given the rounds that we have this year, each day of competition will sit on its own when it comes to team. So if you have a couple different duels leading to your top 2, each day that wrestlers weigh in, that will determine their weight for their weight options, obviously at the weight that they weigh in plus the one above it. And so they might weigh in on Wednesday for 4 teams at a site in the section. They end up on the team that qualifies for state prelims. They would weigh in at the state prelim Saturday. That would determine their weight there. And then if they make it to state a week and a half later, they would weigh in and that would determine their weight there. So it's a little bit different than it has been, but it's because of the different levels and even the overlap between the section and the state. So each date they will weigh in. When they do get to the state level, which won't be your responsibility, but at the state level, there is team and individual on the same day. They will weigh in one time that morning, which will set their weight for that day. So obviously, if they're an individual, they need to make their weight to be able to wrestle in their weight class, and that will be also determining the 2 possible weights that they would wrestle in team. So I'm going to pause for a moment, and I've been running through things quickly. Any quick questions on that? Susie, did you keep everyone from being able to unmute?
Nope, they should be able to unmute.
Just kidding.
Eric, I just texted Brad on this weigh-in, and I'm just trying to cross-check with what I had in notes, and if it's changed, I'm absolutely fine with it. But in the past, your team tournament, if you weighed 125 on Tuesday and the next round was on Thursday, you had to make 125 or you were scratched. This year, we're saying each day we redefine a minimum weight?
Correct. That's my understanding.
Okay. Okay.
I will double check and we'll make sure and get that out in clear writing for everybody. But I believe that's where we landed, and that was about 24 hours old at most. So I know there was a number of emails going back and forth on that.
Okay. Okay.
My last conversation with John last night at 9 o'clock, that's where we landed. And really around the fact of continuing to have to travel with weigh-in sheets and things like that. We wouldn't want a kid to be eliminated because we didn't have good record keeping. So.
Eric, I have a question on the weigh-ins.
Sure.
I think in the guidelines it referred to 1 hour weigh-ins, and then is that applied again to the individual where typically it's been a 2 hour weigh-in? Do we stay to the 1 hour?
I believe that we are at 1 hour. Yes. And that's
Okay.
what we're planning for our state final venue and our state prelims as well in terms of when that's set up. So. Yep.
Okay. Then my other question then is, this came from some coaches and I wanted clarification. If, the team amount is 25 total, I believe, of chairs, can a team substitute extra coaches or managers for wrestlers?
Nope.
Okay.
You get 3 spots for coaches, you get 1 spot for a manager, and you get 21 for wrestlers. So,
All right, thank
and
you.
again, that 21 is up 2 from what it used to be because of the additional 2 alternates that exist there. So if you remember 19, obviously that's changed through board policy to move that to 21.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
Eric, is there a uniform way of seating, especially like in the individuals? Using track wrestling, any help with that?
Yep. So that's been determined, and I know that Tony and John worked through that, and we're going to use the typical process that's used. Now, I'm not going to be the expert in what that looks like, but they are going to use track wrestling to do the seating for sections.
Thank you.
Yep. And that will also be an updated section guidance is going to be published. It's been written at this time. It's just not on the website yet. We will send that directly to each one of you as well so that you have that clear information.
Going back to Dan's question, for the team tournament portion, it's 21 wrestlers, 3 coaches, and one manager. But for the individual tournament, it's the qualifying or the participating wrestlers and 3 coaches, no managers, correct?
Correct. Yep. Yep. 1 coach per qualifying participant, up to 3 total.
Eric, if they use 2 gyms, like Cass Lake, I know is going to be using 2 gyms for both sections 7 individual and then the super section also when we come together, would that be 3 coaches per gym?
So are you going to have 2 different teams or what are you talking?
So I'm talking the individual, I'm sorry. So this is for the individual tournament.
So my understanding is, and again, remember, first time ever and also dealing with the pandemic, right? But my understanding is we're maxing at 3 coaches. And that might be a state, it was built off of state final site piece. So if we're talking about more than 4 mats, then I might revisit that with the leadership team.
Okay.
All right?
That's for sure something that Cass Lake says they're doing. So that would be something we would want to know because you could definitely have kids wrestling without a coach.
Yep. Yeah. If there's I know we looked at the 4 mat possibility, and with 4 mats, we don't think there's any chance that there'd ever be more than 3 wrestling at a time, and that would be unusual. But yeah, well, if we're talking more than 4 mats, then that's a possibility. We'll have to revisit that.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Eric, I just had a quick question. Again, individual sections, weigh-ins would just be 1 hour before, and then you do your seating meeting and you want to do all that within an hour is what we're saying? Am I understanding that right?
That is the information that I have from the leadership team. That's why we have these things to see if there is additional questions or clarifications we need to take a look at. We'll make sure and revisit that. I know that Susie's keeping a list of a couple of questions. The multiple gym site for individual is something we need to look at. And then also that timeline for individual. Sounds like that's been 2 hours to be able to address any seating issues that might have to be relooked at. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's usually 2.5 is what we've done in the past. So
Appreciate that, Byron. Thanks.
Thank you.
Eric,
Yep.
with that one, we did talk about that one of those long nights that we had, and it was with the Zoom and Google now. I think it's a capability that these coaches can get together on an earlier date and seed that tournament versus that day. Again, I think many of the schools are concerned about having people on site too long, and that's why we kept on landing on that 1 hour.
Yep,
So,
and that's been the primary aspect of we want to get people there, we want to get them warmed up, we want to wrestle, and then we want to move on, right? And so you're exactly right, Mark. It was part of our conversation. I think we just need to talk about what is that process so that sections know how they take care of those individual seeds if there are concerns.
Can I just throw in an idea? What the coaches brought up was they also want, there's warm-up time, and also there is we can seed before, but after the weigh-ins, there's usually a quick meeting where there has to be maybe an adjustment or two in the bracket. And then the coaches can get it back, be part of the warm up with the kids. So I'm thinking if we could just add another half hour to that in the individual, I think we could have both things being met.
I'll take it back, Dan. Thanks for that suggestion. Appreciate it. I'm going to keep moving on the agenda, and then jot down your questions if you have them. We'll try and address things that might pop up as we go forward. So official coaches number 5, we talked about that. We will review the multiple gym setting and what that might look like to make sure that student athletes have coverage with the coach. But again, that limit is for 3, and we don't replace from athlete to manager to coach in terms of positions. Been really clear, and our region secretaries appreciates your support in really holding to those official squad size. Our hope is that we continue to be able to have spectators. And if that's the case, additional coaches and or managers can purchase a ticket and can be in a spectator, but we don't run them back and forth between a spectator pod and the floor. So they are one or the other, and welcome to be there if there's room within the allocations that exist for tickets. So we'll talk through that a little bit. Certified team lineups. I know you've done this before, making sure that you're certifying the postseason wrestling weights for the participants, 21 students per team. Reminder that on the ineligible students, if they're ineligible for any reason and they are rostered, which they could be, that one, they can't be in uniform and on the bench in a position where they could or might look like they could be used. They can remain on the roster for that particular day. You would have 20 instead of 21. And then at whatever point they become eligible, they could return to the roster in the spot that they hold. It's a little bit different on the injured side. And again, remember that injured this year is going to also apply to quarantine. So you might have student athletes who would be on that roster of 21, but for the fact that they're out for 14 days or 10 days, whatever that number happens to be, if that falls underneath the injured athlete, so they are going to be replaced specifically by an individual. If they come back to a point where they are healthy and or cleared from quarantine, then they replace back the specific individual who was put on the roster for them. So I think that's important to recognize how those quarantines are going to be dealt with if they happen, and or a positive case if someone's coming back off of that. Again, you're managing the way in which the tournament works. The school has to be the ones to determine whether or not that individual is ready to wrestle and should be on the roster, but otherwise they're replaced. So as we continue forward, there's medical information, and I think there's a lot of experience here, and you worked through that. That hasn't changed a lot. Sections are providing the medical folks and responsible for that at the section level. When we get to the state prelim, again, they're likely going to be arranged with the state prelim site. They are our responsibility to have someone there, yet they're likely to be a local individual where and when we can do that. So we're working with folks and believe that we've already communicated with our state prelim sites and asked a number of questions about what services they have, what things look like, date and times, those kinds of things, so that we can put together a master calendar. Again, leave it to a pandemic to create a whole new round of wrestling that the state's responsible for. And it's just the way that it works out. If we're trying to stay to 8 wrestlers per individual class in any site, we have to add additional rounds and be able to make that work. So understand that it looks different. Again, transfer of care form is within your packet. If a team brings a medical individual, they need to be a certified individual in medicine providing that care. And again, the on-site person provided is number 1 in line in terms of responsibility, but that care can be transferred over per their discretion. Once they're dealing with the situation, they could transfer that care over to the team medical personnel if they believe that is appropriate. So those forms need to be filled out and provided as we go forward with that. Distribution of state tournament information is likely going to be electronic this year. And so because of the turnaround between when section team happens onto the state prelims and when individual sections happen onto the state prelims, it's going to be pretty quick turnaround. That information is likely to be sent to email to head coaches and likely include ADs, just to make sure the communication gets there around that. As you know, audio and video rights work through your region. And as the league, we're here to support the region secretary in anything that might need to happen with those access points to do the audio and video aspect of that. Again, as it relates to member schools and their use of media, some will want to have students doing video or those things. They wouldn't be on the mats. If they would have a ticket, they would be a spectator. It wouldn't be something necessarily that would keep them from recording for their team, but they are not going to be in proximity to the mat like oftentimes they might be doing. So just keep that in mind. And I think we touched base on seating already. That is as per normal. And again, that information is included here in your handout and talks through what that looks like. So making sure that, that those things are followed and people are well aware and understand that. You've got contact information for John for sure in terms of if there are questions around the track wrestling seating that happens there. So looking at the chat, in regards to who the three coaches are, Max, do you want to unmute and just ask me, are you talking about from one round to another round? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, it just said that they can't be replaced. I would just hope that if a coach is sick, that we would give them the opportunity to stay home and therefore be replaced on the team roster or whatever.
Yep, and I think really what the application of that is they wouldn't be replaced back and forth between spectator and on the floor. So when your team shows up, they might be the coach for that day because someone is out or ill, but never more than 3 and they're for the day, right? And I wish I had an answer on if all 21 wrestlers have to have the same uniform. That would be one of those, haven't done this before, so I can't tell you if that's the case or not the case. So I can certainly bring that back and address that, or I can just reach out to you directly with a good answer. If we go to the next sheet, you have your event management keys. And again, many of you are quite experienced. And so I don't need to add a lot here. A lot of this is just a way for you to communicate with your sites. If you have more than one site or multiple sites and you're working with site managers and how they're doing things, this is a good cheat sheet to be able to say, have you covered all of these things? Do you have the contacts that you need? And to make sure that that's there. I think the one thing is to make sure that disqualifications are communicated immediately, especially with the turnaround in time frame, because from section on to state prelims is not going to be nearly as long as what it normally would be. So that's one of those things you want to highlight and make sure if unfortunately they happen that we get that information, we're able to address it as quickly as possible related to those kinds of situations. So again, results are important because people are going to be watching and there's going to be a lot of folks that are interested that aren't going to be able to be in the venue. And so I know there'll be a lot of texting and different electronic media to share that information out. And this is just a good cheat sheet to be able to use and to give everyone along with any specific notes that you might have that need to be shared. So the other one I want to make a highlight of is the Wrestling Section Manager's Guide. And in there, there's lots of information, far more details. So it's a good thing to compare your notes that you might have taken from here against what you're seeing within the Wrestling Section Manager's Guide. Walk that through and take a look at things. We've been promised that we'll have perfect weather, so that won't be an issue. But should it crop up, it'll be right in the middle of spring snow season. We'll have to be ready to make adjustments and continue to move forward. And if anything, we've learned a lot of flexibility in this year, and keeping people safe and in a good place is going to be a priority for us. You recognize that there's one area in here that is still TBD, and that's around the section awards. People have lots of questions around that, and we spent a little time with region secretaries this morning talking about that. Your first and second place team will be determined at the state prelim round. Our coaches felt it was important to be able to identify a section champion and team if we can do that. So that's why the top 2 will wrestle at the state prelim. Again, trying to keep 4 teams or less at any one site at any one time. And we know our individual is an anomaly and the only place that we're doing that all season long. But on the team side, we'll wrestle those top 2 out of each section, and then the 2 winners will go forward. We stay away from doing any kind of formal big award ceremonies, and some more information was shared this morning on lead around that, and we'll continue to, or actually we're on region secretaries, I'm sorry, too many meetings in one day, but we'll get more information around what that could look like. and your region secretary will be a great resource for how to do that. But again, very limited. And we know that the less that folks stand around, wrestlers, teams, et cetera, the less that we're going to have crowds that are going to want to do that. And keeping that distance between spectators and the competitors and essential staff is going to be a real key piece. I just tell this to people in every single meeting we have. Optics is everything right now. It's all about good practices and protocols. And in addition, it needs to look appropriate. And so make sure that you're creating that space and have what we need there. So, yeah, I'm looking at the questions that are here. I do believe that tournament management is going to decide how we're going to do that seating aspect relative to the rules and policies, and I have not dug into that on the team side. And I think it can be done, you know, according to your needs. And you know, it's always, we're not doing anything in person these days, so it would be by Zoom. But in terms of how to do the vote and so on, I think there's language there. How many are allowing fans and how many are not? I think on the region secretaries this morning, we saw about a 50-50 split on trying to do that. And again, it has a lot to do with your facility. Think about the fact of if you're exceeding 8 wrestlers per weight class in that first round of sections, it becomes really difficult to manage the space in any one building and have enough room for social distancing and to make that work. And we know that, and so we're giving the discretion. So work with your region secretary on your sites and what that might look like. Continuing to use video stream where we can. And again, regions are able to authorize that. They have the capacity to do that. We continue to work on the media plan overall and who has access. Just as a note, media in our gymnasiums is part of the spectator pod. So if we start thinking about individuals, when we get to state prelim and we bring a couple of different sections together, you've got 20 different schools potentially that are all represented at individual. And if everyone tries to bring a newspaper person or whatever, that starts eating into your spectator group. So State High School League allows spectators per the facility and according to the region. 250 is the max. That includes all those that would be within that pod. And so on the team side, we'll give the guidance in regards to how many tickets per team. We know that we're bringing together 4 at a time in most cases, but otherwise it's going to be up to your region as to how to work through that and what space you have. Remember, it's not only 250, but 25% of the facility. So if you're only using one side, you've got to take that side and say, how do we create the social distancing that we need? Because it shouldn't be shoulder to shoulder unless they're in the same household. So keep in mind those kinds of things as we prepare. So that's pretty rapid fire. You have a number of other documents. If you have questions, you're going to be reaching out. You know, we've got great resources and great leadership. The coaches advisory has been great to work with. I've worked with their president's group primarily, really good dialogue. And again, the leadership group that you all have names and numbers of has just been outstanding, and a lot of planning and a lot of consideration for what we can do. And would just say that when we started this whole process, even late December with the coaches advisory, they said, if you can find any way to get us an individual tournament, that'd be the best present we could get. And so we're going to try and find a way to make that happen. And you guys are all going to be a key part of that being able to come to successful fruition there. So I will stay on for a few minutes. If people want to unmute and ask a question, I'll do my best, or we'll add it to the list.
Hey, Eric, it's Craig. Just wanted to see if John Peterson, is there anything you want to add for track, just for our section managers?
Craig, I don't think John was available today.
Oh, Tony's on the line, that's right.
Yep.
Anything to add on track for section?
Tony might be back in class too. They're
Yeah,
both still
I think
teaching.
so.
I
Yeah.
do know that that John and Tony will be sending out some information, and Susie's got that information. And if you have any questions on track, just reach out to them. But they've made it really easy for us in a difficult process of putting all of these different sites together. So you'll be hearing from John and Tony.
Questions that the group might have, want to unmute.
Eric, I'm sorry, came in a hair late, maybe a couple minutes, but what's our role in the state prelims other than trying to find the venue?
Yeah, so I think where that's going to be at is going to be, once we get the venues, we're going to be obviously looking for, with 12 sites for team and 12 different sites for individual, we're going to look for some leadership of experienced folks. So we'll be working to identify who might be good managers to assist us in managing each of those sites, because we're not going to be able to do that with the staff that we have. So I think it's, some of you have reached out individually and said, hey, if you need help with the state prelims, put me on a list. I'd love to be able to do that. Here's my preferred section, or I want to do the one that I typically have, if I can be part of that. And we might have one or two, just depending on what it looks like in the management of that. So, yep. So stay tuned. We're building it as we fly it right now, quite honestly. So great question, Dan. All right, well, I appreciate your time. Lots of information on the paper. We'll continue to get information out. We'll send out the section guidance once it's been updated and cleaned up a little bit with the things that have been provided. We'll get some answers to those questions. We'll get it back out to this group through an email from Susie. So look for that to come out as well with some written clarification on a couple of those topics. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate your time. And in true Craig Perry fashion, we're pretty close to on time on the wrap up as well. Have a great afternoon.